Crazy.
So, you know, we've been doing these kind of virtual tastings and everything since March, really. And this one I'm excited to do because it's the first one that we're going to integrate some food with. So virtual wine dinner. I've done, I don't even know how many wine dinners in my life, but I've never actually had to do the wine dinner, talking about the wine and the cooking all from my backyard. So we're going to wing this one. We'll see how it goes, but it'll be fun. Ben's going to be manning all the digital stuff. Sonia's going to be my sous chef here. But we were so stoked and happy to partner with Snake River Farms on this. I've been a customer of theirs for a while, got introduced to a friend. I'm a huge steak fan for those of you that know me. And I like to make my steaks aggressively rare for those of you that have had them with me. Don't worry, I'll make yours whatever you want, Sonia. And so, you know, I love meat. I don't know why, but I got into it years ago. And really it was probably about, it's really when I moved to Napa, when I got into the wine industry, I really got into the quality of the meat, the different cooking methods, all the different things you can do. So, I'm not a wide range good chef. I'm hyper really good at making beef. So that's kind of my specialty. I'm like a surgeon when it comes to that. So I've got all the fun toys. You'll see the beefer in a second, which is kind of cool. But Snake River does some awesome stuff. And I just love the flavor profile. They got some really interesting steaks. And they were featuring kind of one of their signatures tonight, which is kind of interesting, the Manhattan filet. But I'll let Noah, so we have a great representative coming in from Snake River who's joining us. Welcome. And tell us about these awesome steaks and about Snake River and all the awesome stuff you guys do.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me. My name's Anella. I am with Snake River Farms, and I've been with the company as of today 13 years. So it's been a while, and it's awesome. It's a great company to work for. We are the leading purveyors of American Wagyu beef in the country, and also throughout the world. We export to about 50 countries right now. We've been doing this. We've been in business. It's a family-owned business. We've been in business since, well, for 52 years this year. And in the late 80s, early 90s, our owner went to Japan, and they had what they had never had before. They had Kobe beef in Japan, and they were all kind of sitting around, a bunch of, farmers from the United States, and they were like, hey, we could do this in the United States. And we were one of the first and only companies to ever be allowed to bring the cattle back from Japan. We brought the genetics back from Japan and started crossbreeding with American traditional American cattle, such as Angus, Charolais, Hereford. And so when you take those beautiful genetics from the Kobe beef and you cross them with traditional cattle, you get this very beautiful, rich, just buttery beef. And so when you have actual true Kobe beef from Japan, because Kobe is the actual region, Wagyu is the breed. When you have beef from Japan that is the Kobe style Wagyu, it's really rich. It's almost so rich that you can only enjoy a couple ounces in yakiniku, shabu shabu, in a style like that. It's a very, very rich. When you crossbreed with traditional cattle, you get the more beefy American flavors crossed with that buttery texture. So you get just the perfect steak. We've been doing this a long time. We're a start to finish, pasture to plate, ranch to table company. So however you want to look at it, we maintain and manage every single piece of the production of the life cycle of that animal, from the time that they're born to the time that you guys get to enjoy them. And we take a lot of pride in that. We are very big on sustainability. Our feeding practices, our animal welfare practices, everything that we do with purpose to make sure that when you sit down to enjoy your meal, every single time you eat it, you just go, oh, that's the best piece of beef I've ever eaten. And we always kind of joke and laugh. Like I said, I've been doing this a long time, and we always get people are like, how do we sell more? How do we sell more? And I'm like, we just got to get them to eat it. And I love going to events like you guys are doing, going to food shows, and just watching people when they get to eat our product for the first time, because their eyes light up. And that's always when I just go, and that's it. And And it's really awesome to get to be a part of a company that is so involved in every piece of what we do. Tonight, I believe you guys are enjoying the Manhattan Filet, which
Yep.
is a center cut. Well, it's a center cut New York. So you've heard of the New York strip. In some places, it's considered a Kansas City strip. I don't know that the fine people of Kansas City or New York want to go to, odds for it, but you can call it whatever you like. It's a strip loin, and it's from the strip complex, from the short loin complex. What we do is we take all of that external fat, we trim them down into just that eye of the muscle and create this beautiful, thick filet cut New York, which is considered a Manhattan. Many times people think, well, it's a filet mignon. Well, I just want a filet, but the filet mignon is actually a tenderloin. The filet is actually a type of cut. And so that's, you can have a ribeye filet, a New York filet, a tenderloin filet. This is the New York. So it's that perfect blend of the texture and flavor and tenderness that you're going to see that's similar to a filet mignon, but that rich buttery flavor that comes from a ribeye. So the New York is it's that perfect blend of those two, in between those two cuts, where it just gives you that perfect bite every time.
Garrett, I think there we go.
There we go. All right. Okay. You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we cook these bad boys?
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to say one thing, Garrett, real quick.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that you are you cook extremely rare. I can't remember what you said.
Yeah.
But,
aggressively,
the one thing, aggressively rare. This is a bit, and you cook them however you want to cook them, my friend. That is completely up to you. What I will tell you is I work with chefs all over the country and folks all the time, where because of the internal marbling that is in Wagyu beef, we do suggest cooking it to a higher temperature. Now, with most steaks, you can't do this because anytime you cook them beyond, that rare, medium rare point, you're going to start to dry out the beef. But what we ask is that you really give that internal marbling a chance to break down. So while you are an aggressively rare person, I would ask of you to maybe try it aggressively rare and then put it back on and let it go for a while and then take it off. Usually we say to cook to medium. And the reason why we say that is because it does give that. And I've been in restaurants with chefs and they look at me and they're like, you are absolutely insane. And I go, no, I promise, let's do it. Let's taste it right now. And we put it on, we pull it off at rare, medium rare, taste it, put it back on, taste it at medium, pull it off at medium, taste it. And everybody goes, oh, hey. So give it a try. I mean, like I said, you do you. That's the great thing about eating and drinking is that everyone is different. Everyone gets to enjoy things differently. But if you do find that when you're cooking at rare or medium rare, it's a bit chewy, you're going, oh, this just doesn't taste right. Put it back on and let it cook just a little bit longer and then take it back off. And you're going to find that it's a much better bite.
Yeah, well, so I do know that we got to get that marbling to break down. So I actually pulled these out about an hour and a half ago. So they're not warm, but also the beefer, because it's so hot, I find that it penetrates because, a lot of times if you cook steaks really rare, and I'm sure you've had this, where the center is supposed to be almost cool or cold, but this thing is so hot, it doesn't cook all the way through, but at least the middle is warm. So, I'm going to do a few that are rare, and most of the crowd here does not like their steak still mooing. So we'll have an opportunity to see who likes what the best. But why don't you bring it? I know we'll see if the camera works over here. Bring it over here. We got to take a look at these bad boys. I'm sure everyone is looking at them, I guess. But we've got a group here. Can you see all that, Ben? Is that coming through?
Yeah,
okay?
It's coming through. It's a little bit laggy, but we're getting it.
That's okay. All right. We'll get back into the better Wi-Fi in a sec. So what I do, honestly, everyone's like, oh my God, how do you season it? It's really simple for me. And I know I'm curious if you guys have a preference, but it really is just really, oh yeah, got a little June bug. Yeah, you can see we're not doing this in the studio. Really coarse kosher salt, And, you know, honestly, you're going to be saying, holy crap, that is a lot of salt, but that's how they do it in the steakhouses, and that's why it tastes so good.
We're a big fan
And then we'll
of
have
just the salt, pepper, meat, and fire. That's all it takes to get a great steak. When you say it looks like a lot of salt,
Good.
everybody freaks out, especially when you do a roast. It's even crazier. But what you have to remember is
Yeah.
that you're seasoning that entire piece of meat.
Right.
So,
and these are perfectly cut, and they're thick. And that's the thing too, is people might be used to the grocery store getting a thinner, you know, 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch cut steak. But when you've got like a 1.5 inch steak, all that middle part has no seasoning on it.
Yeah.
So the thicker the steak, the heavier you got to go. So one of the things Sony will tell you, I was heartbroken, but everyone said, Garrett, not everyone is going to eat that and buy that. What I really love from Snake River, because it's just absurd, is the Wagyu dry aged tomahawk that is probably like, I don't know, how big are those? Like 96. How many ounces are those? Or like 50 ounces? Or
yeah, I think we have one that's 40 and one that's 56. They're ginormous. Wagyu is just as the breed. They're a very large breed.
Those are
so when you start,
I would test too.
Yeah, when you start cutting, you know, when you start fabricating those steaks, the breed itself is just so big. And the reason that is, and a lot of the reason why you taste such a beautiful piece of meat, is because we feed them for 3 times longer than traditional cattle. Traditional cattle are on feed for about 160 days. All of our cattle are on feed for a minimum of 30 months. So that's what gives it that beautiful marbling. And then but they're ginormous. And so when you start cutting, especially like those ribeyes, we didn't have them on the site for a long time because everybody was like, oh, they're too big. And now people can't get enough of them. We can't keep them in stock.
That's because Garrett orders them all.
Yeah. I've got a couple in the freezer. But yeah, so the only other thing besides salt and pepper, I do sneak a little garlic powder in there, but that's because I feel like garlic has to be a significant part of every meal. But that's just personal preference, so I don't really need it. But you know, people can get fancy with all the different, you know, seasonings and oh my gosh, and you know what I've found is less is more when it comes to beef, because the meat is so good. If you have a subpar steak, yeah, add whatever you want to it and just go crazy with it. But these ones, you really want the flavor to come through, and I think that salt, pepper, garlic does a pretty good job doing that. So okay, so we're pretty much ready here. So let me show you this cool thing. This is my baby. Yeah, so here, I want to look under. It's gonna be hard to tell, but so this thing is called the Beefer. It's about a 15 to 1800 degree overhead broiler. So if any of you have ever been to and we're
having a hard time hearing you.
Sear, but it's a touchless perfect sear. So why don't you back up a little bit, and then I think the audio. 1 second.
Okay, I think you're back. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to catch up to you here in a second.
So bear with. Good. All right. Is that audio pretty good?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay. So the Beefer 1800 over degree broiler, but it's contactless cooking, but gives you a super hard sear if you want it. And there's this little lever here. So the higher I get it, the closer to the flame. It gets really hot. But like when I was saying my steak, I do really rare. I do 1 minute on one side and I pull it down, flip it over, 1 minute on the other side, the steak's done. And then you'll see I've got a kind of a method to my madness here. Those that I want a little bit more cooked, you put them on first, and handily I've got some cast iron skillets over here ready to rock and roll for the more cooked ones. So let's start going. But hey, I'm making these in, and I think, I don't know, we're going to start with Petite Sirah first?
Yeah.
Let's start with Petite Sirah.
Yeah, why not?
Think? So you wanna walk everyone through the Petite Sirah so I can
yeah, sure.
Focus on the meat here for a second?
Yeah, so let's talk about this wine. So this could be the thickest, most intensely textured Trinitas Cellars wine I've ever had. When I first poured this, I could not believe it almost had like an oily sheen to it. And the reason why, I mean, our Petite Sirah every year, right? The 13, the 14, whichever one you've ever had, I'm sure you're always like, wow, this is really intense. It's really jammy. It's just kind of like this explosion of berry fruit. But with the 2015 vintage, that was the third vintage of a drought. So not only were the temperatures super extreme, right? It's really hot, plus where that location of that vineyard is, we sourced it from Oakley. For those of you who don't know, that's in Contra Costa County. They get a really good amount of heat there. It's on this sandy soil, which we'll talk about in a second. But not only was it hot, in a very hot area already, but it was the third year in the drought, so the vines were struggling, and the crop set was very, very light, right? So yields in 2015 were down. As a result, the vine has less fruit on it, and all of that energy, all of that goodness that's, the vine's producing from photosynthesis is going into this more concentrated grape. So that's why this wine is so intense. And then on top of that, Petite Sirah is always usually pretty full throttle. So it's just kind of a trifecta of site, variety, and year that's just maximizing the octane on this wine. And when you swirl it around the glass, I mean, it is just a total bruiser. For me, it's just tons of like baked blueberries, blackberries, toasted vanilla. And it just goes on and on and on. And on the palate, when you take that sip, you can really taste that texture. And I think it kind of shifts the flavors into like a baked berry cobbler, like vanilla bean pie. And you have a little bit of tannin that's coming from that thick Petite Sirah skin, but not too much. It's quite gentle, but overall, it's just an opulent, juicy, scrumptious wine. In fact, this wine got cellar selection from Wine Enthusiast, 93 points from their editor. And then it also won I believe it was gold medal at the SF Chronicle in 2018. So, I mean, this thing is just undeniably delicious. For people who've never had Petite Sirah, it's a great one to pour for them. Garrett, did you want to chime in on the steak?
Yeah, we're going here. We got one side done. I did about a minute in 10, but I don't know if you can see it. The char is amazing on these things when you get it in there. I usually just have like 2 to 4 on here. This is the most I've ever done, so makes it a little trickier.
And do you rest your steaks as well, Garrett?
A little bit. Not like for 20 minutes or anything crazy. But it's hard to tell. I apologize with the video, but you can, just 1 minute under this thing, and there's a little tray here, and the fat has already rendered. There's a lot of drippings and stuff, so it really does a good job. I got to keep remembering to look at my time here.
Yeah, and speaking of which, that's part of the reason why we chose Petite Sirah, right? So both these wines is the reason why we chose them. And that reason is because they're so intense and full throttle, they can stand up really nicely and complement that fat that you're going to find within these steaks, right? Because these steaks are amazing when it comes to the marbling. So we picked 2 wines that are going to pair well with that. It's kind of interesting. The Petite Sirah is going to have way less tannin than the Petit Verdot does. But that intensity on the fruit and that viscosity on the palate is really what's going to make it a good pairing. Whereas the Petit Verdot, it's going to be a much different flavor profile. It's going to have a lot more savory, like juniper flavors into it. I think you get a little bit of a black olive tapenade on it myself, but that also has a lot more structure and acid, right? So from a structural standpoint, these wines are actually quite different. They're both very intense, but they're intense in different ways. So again, kind of a lower tannin for a Petite Sirah for us because of the year and because of the sandy soils, but super good fruit intensity. On the other side, the Petit Verdot is structured and it's lifted, and it also doesn't sacrifice that fruit intensity. It's not quite as viscous, it's not quite as full throttle as a Petite Sirah, but it's up there.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, chemically speaking, the Petite Sirah has a lot of structure. But what I love about this wine is that it also, as Ben was saying, has just amazing fruit on it. And it almost masks the tannin. So it's incredible steak wine, but not overwhelming and focused on the tannin. You can really dial in the fruit, which is awesome.
Yeah, and that's actually
So-
a really good point. These two varieties in general are some of the most tannic varieties you're ever going to come across from California, without a doubt. Like I would argue that on average, a Petite Syrah and a Petite Verdot, 100% volume, which is quite rare, is usually going to be more tannic than a Cabernet Sauvignon on average. But again, because of the year, because of the site, and because of the winemaking style, that Petite Syrah that we're having, the 15, it's not a tannic monster where you got to cellar it for 5 to 10 years before you can really enjoy it. It's way more accessible than what that varietal normally would be. So yeah, it's a really interesting combination.
Yeah, I will say, like Ben said, that Petite Verdot is pretty approachable, even though it's only 5 years old, but it's going to hang in there for a long time. But we did, and you'll see when we get to the table in a few minutes, we did decant it because I think it does deserve a little bit of that. So that's how we started the Petite Syrah. So if you popped both bottles, start with the Petite. It's a little bit easier to drink before a pre-steak because of that nice fruit, but also that Petite Verdot will respect a little bit more oxygen that you're taking there. So, anyway, how about we open it up to questions and see if anyone's got questions for Anela on Snake River Farms and the steaks and everything while she's still with us.
Yeah, and friendly reminder, if you're muted, you can go ahead and unmute yourself in the bottom left corner of your screen.
And you can throw it up in the chat too if you prefer.
Yeah, that
to
works
do a
as well.
chat.
Smells so good up here. My stomach is growling.
Any questions? Steak, Petite Syrah, Garrett's amazing bib or apron he's got on there that's too short.
We
Thanks,
call
Dan.
those it's a bistro apron. We got you, Garrett.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's French, right?
Got me
It's
covered.
French. It's French. When you're never sure, just say, "Oh, it's French."
Yeah. I would say I feel bad that everyone can't smell how good this smells, but actually everyone's got steak at home, so that's the good news.
How many people are making
Okay.
tonight?
All right, John, I just requested to unmute you. I saw that in the chat, so I think you need to accept it on your side, and you should be, there you go, good to go.
Yeah, we don't even know what our question is, but we wanted to talk, so.
Hey, well, just say whatever on your mind.
That's good too.
No, so I was wondering about the beef. When you bred it with American cattle, is that like a one-time deal, or do you gradually purify it over a? I mean, is it change over time, or is it a
put butter on all those?
It's a great question. And so we actually, it's what's called an F1 cross is what what you get when you do, 100% Wagyu genetics with the traditional cattle. We do have a 100% herd of Wagyu bulls as well as Wagyu mother cows. And that's the basis of our genetics program. It's really cool. We were actually talking about it a couple months ago at one of our meetings, where the genetics that we brought over, 25 years ago, those cattle that were in the program that started our program wouldn't even make it in our program now, because we've continually perfected the genetics and increased the bloodlines and the progeny that come out of those cattle. And so now we have a much higher quality cattle breed than we had 25 years ago.
Uh-huh. And is the daily environment a lot different than it is in a normal cattle operation, or is it?
They just eat a lot. They chill a lot. I mean, cows don't do a whole lot.
Uh-huh.
There are a lot of people who are like, well, they need, 200 acres a piece. Not really, because they don't really move more than your backyard. They love to eat and they love to hang out. And we have huge pastures. I mean, we grass feed everything for the first year of life. And then they move into a feeding operation where we have geneticists, we have veterinarians, we have, people that take care of them every single day. So it's a pretty amazing operation.
So how many head do you have at any given time?
At any given time, on our Wagyu side, I think right now it's between like 50 and 80,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's little. I mean, we produce about 1,000 head a week of Wagyu.
Wow.
And that's a short, and we're a small production company. We do traditional cattle as well. And we process about 1,500 head a day on the traditional side. And we're a pretty small company. They actually just announced that we are building our second production facility here in Idaho over the course of the next 2 years. So yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff in the world of beef.
And can they, I mean, do you have to have continued permission to operate that, or you have a permanent sort of grant of, I mean, I guess because you're breeding your own cattle, you're good.
Yeah, so all of the cattle that are in our Snake River Farms program are owned by us. We do lease out and contract with ranchers, just because you can't keep that many cattle just hanging out in one city. So we contract with but we manage all of their feed. We own the company that produces the nutritional supplements, not necessarily supplements, it's vitamins and minerals that go into any kind of, so if it's a colder winter and they need more of a certain vitamin, then they work with that. I mean, that's why we have all the veterinarians on staff that we do. Oh, there's a cattle question. I didn't see it, Ben. I couldn't see the
If the
chat.
cattle live in Idaho, why did the steaks ship from Kansas City? Great
Awesome question. So the cattle actually live all over the Northwest and a bit of California. So everybody, has obviously seen the happy cows come from California commercials, and it's no joke. They do. They love the temperament there. But all of our cattle are mostly based in Idaho, Oregon, Washington State, and Montana. That being said, it is not it's not good to you guys for us to ship from Washington State. Our production facility is in Washington State. And when in our infancy of shipping online, we started shipping out of Washington State, and it was more to ship the product than it was to, make the product, because we can only ship express out of Washington State to get it to you on time, express or overnight. When we found a fulfillment center in Kansas City, you can reach the entire country via 3-day ground transit from Kansas City. So that's why we ship out of Kansas City, because we can offer, $10 flat rate shipping versus $200 shipping.
All right. Any other
Makes
questions? Sense. Looks like Garrett's making his way back into the house. Steaks must be ready. Let's go ahead and let's see what's going on.
Let us in. Let us in. I know. They're coming. So while they were talking, I don't know if you saw, but my last secret ingredient, especially with the broiler, is you broil and you basically baste the butter right into the meat. So a little extra. These steaks don't really need it, but I like to be a little aggressive. So, all right, well, we're going to move to our dining room cam. So we'll close this one out and join you guys at dinner.
All right. I think Garrett's connecting his audio here, and he'll be back up and running. Any questions in the meantime about the wine, the Petit Syrah thus far? We see you, Garrett, but we can't hear you.
Oh, I think.
I got you.
He's saying.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. That's on me. There we go. All right, I think you're set.
It's not my first Zoom.
I know. I should have known better.
Awesome. Well, so we're just getting ready. Looks like now I get to see everybody. This is much better. I was just looking at the iPhone earlier. How's everyone doing? Thumbs up. All right. Good.
Yeah.
Great. Good. Well, we're gonna dive in here too. We got a little party. Looks like we got a couple other people for a little party. So I dig it. Welcome. Glad you joined us. So now we eat. I guess I'm gonna go serve myself, but you gotta. Yeah, we're working on it.
China there.
I saw that.
What?
Like your patriotic China you've got there.
Yeah, right. We my wife and I we got married June 14th in 2014, which is Flag Day. So this was on our registry. This is our daily China, I guess. Although it's daily America.
14, 614.
What's that?
We're married on 14, 614.
Yeah, 6/14/14.
That's right.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna get our food going here.
And then we'll be back.
So Ben, you want? I guess we can. But we don't have to show that off. It's all about the steak. Ben, you want to walk them through the Petit Verdot while we get situated here?
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody grab a glass of the Petit Verdot, give it a swirl, let the esters release, activate those, stick your nose in there and smell that. Anyone who's off mute, I'd love to know if you're smelling something that jumps out at you. I'd love for you just to chime in and tell me what you're smelling. But for me, there's a big contrast between the Petit Syrah and the Petit Verdot, particularly in the aromas. And I think that that's expressed through this savory characteristic, right? I think I mentioned it. I get some juniper on this wine. I get some black cherry, some olive tapenade. I still get a lot of that dark, like black fruit. I don't really get any of the blue fruit, but it's a little bit more a wider spectrum, right, with that savoriness. And that's not something I necessarily got on the Petit Syrah. Like the Petit Syrah, okay, there might have been like a little bit of molasses or like a maple going on, but it doesn't have like this shrub characteristic, this wild side, this feral side. And so after you've had a good whiff of it, go ahead and swirl it around one more time, let it sit, and then take a nice sip of that. And if anyone again wants to jump in, by all means, go for it. But on the palate, I mean, I think that this thing shows tons of lift, which is again another contrast to the Petit Syrah. And what I mean by lift is that like that acid, right? So like the way we detect acid level within a wine is that reaction we get in our salivary glands, right? Whenever you have, like if you were to bite into a lemon, it would just be screaming. And the stronger that is, the more acid there is in a wine. It's a pretty good telltale sign. So for me, I mean, when I drink the Petit Verdot, I know right away. I mean, not only is the Petit Syrah, again, a hulking beast of a wine, but this Petit Verdot, it's way more lifted. And then when I think about like the mouthfeel, like the way the tannins are, the way the tannins coat my palate, it is more structured, right? So it has more structure, it has more acid, and it's a little bit more lifted. When I say lifted, that's what I mean by that, right? There's some energy that kind of just like erupts when you take that sip, and it carries it into the finish. And as far as the flavors on the palate are concerned, I think they fall in tow with what you smell on the aroma side of things. And it's just a ton of dark berries, savory spices. And it just keeps going on and on and on. And I think what's really impressive about this wine is that the finish is really persistent, right? So it just like lingers and sits. And so I think when you pair that with a steak, when you have something like that has that like kind of that, that feral savory side and also has that really nice structure and that nice acid, it's going to be an excellent complement to the fat content within that steak. And then, you also have that dark berry fruit, which we all know is fantastic when it comes to pairing with proteins like meat. So I think overall it's just a wonderful, wonderful pairing for it. And it is, it's an intense wine, but at the same time, it's also vastly different than, the Petit Syrah that we just tried moments ago. So what does everyone think? Nothing? Crickets? Come on.
Get settled in. Looks like people are enjoying their dinners.
Yeah. I think Patty's trying to unmute. Patty, are you?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of flavor.
Yeah. So what did you think about the difference between the two? Did you think there was a pretty sharp difference? I mean, they're both intense, right?
Yeah. I mean, I just get a lot more fruit from the Petit Syrah.
Yeah.
And, a little more of the minerality, spiciness from the.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of fun because when you pair that with steak, it makes a completely different, completely different taste.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Nice. Which was your favorite, just out of curiosity?
Petit Verdot.
The Bordeaux, okay, yeah.
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 Especially
Yeah, that's one too. That's, you know, it's interesting. Usually, yeah, that's one. Again, it's a rare. You know, we didn't talk about this, but Petit Verdot is almost exclusively in the market as a blended grape, right? Like a lot of people are going to blend it in with Cabernet Sauvignon, or they're going to blend it in with Meritage blend, or they're going to blend it in with Cabernet Franc or Merlot. And usually, what they're blending it in for is for that structure. It's for that, you know, that acid and that tannin quality, because it just, you know, if you have a Cabernet Sauvignon or if you have a Merlot, let's say Merlot, right, it doesn't necessarily have really high tannins, but it has beautiful purity of fruit, and you add something like Petit Verdot to it, it really gives it this another dimension, right? And it's also giving it this ageability that it might not have by itself. So it's notorious for being a blending grape. But that said, you know, it's when you do find it as 100% varietal bottle, it's always fun to try it, because sometimes it's ferociously tannic. To the point where you can't open it for 10 years, right, from the vintage. But again, 2015, and we made a 2016 Petit Verdot. But again, 2015 was an exceptional year in quality, but it was also just an extreme year when it came to that heat and that crop set. So 2015 overall is a much more exuberant, approachable vintage across the board in Napa. And I think that that speaks to this Petit Verdot. I mean, it's structured, but it's not to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, this is uncomfortable, the amount of tannin that's, you know, saturating the palate. So
Delicious.
nice. Anyone else? Any other questions about this wine? I mean, I can tell you, actually, I tried the 2016 Petit Verdot last weekend. I was writing the tasting note for us. And it's amazing how well those two wines, the 15 and the 16, line up to the vintage. I mean, the 16 has way more structure, and it was a cooler year comparatively. So it's incredible how you can really tell that if you ever have a chance to try them side by side, you can really see how the vintage is influencing that structure. All right. Garrett, unmuting. He's waving for us. I'm putting you on. You're good.
Ben said it so people can unmute themselves, but
it is.
So this is great. Sorry, we had to settle for a second, but just to show everybody, this isn't even my rarest steak, just to really get people a little uncomfortable. That's how I like it.
Garrett and I are going to have a conversation offline.
Does that meet Anella's standards? I don't know.
Garrett, you're killing me, man.
Hey, look. You talked all about how you treat the animals and fair treatment and everything. My whole deal is I don't like to kill them twice.
You do you, man. I mean, in other restaurants, they call that tartare and carpaccio, but we'll let you slide calling it a steak.
That's what I should do. I should get your guys' beef and make tartare out of it. I have a meat grinder.
Oh, it's phenomenal.
You blend. My favorite is you blend. I haven't done it with Snake River, but usually I save that for cooking. But I do a blend of filet and ribeye. So the filet obviously is the more classic tartare. If you get really good prime ribeye with that way more marbling in it, it's like ridiculous.
Garrett, Mike said he can hear your steak mooing.
Yeah, I do that.
From California, Northern California.
That's a great thing about steaks. I think about wines. I think about just food in general. I mean, I'm always say that I'm very fortunate to be in an industry where you really just get to be a part of what people do every single day. And if you want to eat it rare, if you want to, I mean, I will maybe have a talk with you if you decide to eat it well done. But
amazing. It's so good.
But, yeah, it gives you, it gives you that chance to really just enjoy it how it's supposed to be enjoyed.
Serum is perfect too.
Yeah.
But if you want to smack it with rosemary, or when you baste it, or you want to add some thyme, always do your thing.
What's your favorite way to cook them?
Oh, I'm very much the way you did. I'm a salt, pepper, meat, fire. That's it. A little bit of garlic. If you're not cooking, if I'm not doing Wagyu, if I'm doing, choice or prime, I'm a huge fan of tallow, and we do a tallow. And so anytime you have like a lesser graded steak, you can always float tallow at the end, and that's going to give you that really beautiful Kobe flavor, that Wagyu flavor without it being a Wagyu steak. So
But do you do it in the oven or on the grill, or what do you do?
I'm equal opportunity griller. I love the steakhouse method, you know, cast iron skillet on the stovetop and then straight into an oven. I like a reverse sear if you're doing a bigger steak, like a tomahawk, a tri-tip, anything in that realm. Reverse sear is a great way to go. I also dabble a bit in working on a smoker, and so I do a lot of big meats. I do a lot of brisket and stuff like that, and so that's a completely different cook. And so yeah, it's just get out there. I mean, I always say play with your food and experience a lot of different steaks. A lot of people always say, well, what's your favorite steak? What's your favorite steak? And I always say, if someone tells you their favorite steak's a filet mignon, then they've not eaten enough steaks. Because there are a lot of really beautiful, delicious cuts that come off of those animals, and they just experience them all. Have a beef flight one night and just,
Well,
be careful how much you eat, but yeah.
I feel like New York's, well, I guess it just depends. Like some people aren't as excited about them. If you don't do it right, they can be a little tough. And my wife usually doesn't like them because of the big fat line on the side of it, But that's why I think these are a great compromise, because she's a huge filet fan.
Yeah.
But, this is kind of that, right? You kind of take the best part of the New York, you get rid of a lot of the excess, fat. It's the most tender part of the steak. And it just came out amazing. So
yeah, we have a bavette steak on the site right now that is fairly new to the website, and I would suggest that over anything right now on the site. The bavette and the outside skirt are just phenomenal, and it's great because you can really treat them with different applications and enjoy them. I think that's the great thing about like I said, being able to cook and having so many options is really just getting to play with your food.
Where does the bavette come from on the cow?
So the bavette's a bottom sirloin flap. So it's from that sirloin complex. So, you're going to have your top sirloin, then you're going to see where your tri-tip, your picanha is also up on top. That's a sirloin cap steak. And then the bottom sirloin flap is what it's called. I mean, that's why it doesn't say that on the website, because doesn't sound very pretty. Again, bavette, it's French. You make it French, you sell way more.
There's on speed dial to talk about meat, I'm sure.
I told Ben earlier, I'm like, I can talk about hamburger for 2 hours. So I don't know if you guys picked the right girl tonight, but maybe you did. Well, but the bavette is so marbled and it's so beautiful, and it's just got such great flavor. And that's kind of my go-to, with a great big glass of red, a delicious bavette. And yeah, that's a happy weekend right there.
Yeah, my wife kind of goes nuts because I've got a couple friends. One of them is who a few years ago introduced me to ordering Snake River online. I've had it in like restaurant stuff, but we text, and like there's one guy, another guy. All we basically text about or Facebook about to each other is meat. So I, gotta like take a picture tonight and be like, where were you guys? Like, but I don't know. I don't know if I could work at Snake River Farms. That'd be fueling my problem. But then again, I work at a winery, and that's a different.
We're definitely beef snobs. I mean, I have a 7-year-old niece who will not eat unless it's Aunt Nella's steak, and she will not eat if there is no pink. She's like, send it back. And you're like, oh my goodness, she's 7. What's good? What have I done? But they love it, and it's awesome.
Our kids will get there. They're a little young, but they like my ribs. That's like the meat they like so far.
I love it. Well, I'm going to let you guys enjoy your dinner.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
I'm going to hop off. If anybody has any questions, you guys are welcome to, reach out to us and let us know. And, we're always here to help. We hope you guys enjoy your dinner, and thanks for letting us be a part of it.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, have a beautiful weekend, everyone.